The Zambian economy has in the recent past experienced severe volatility, and this has been as a result of a depreciating currency. Making things worse is even the high cost of energy that has also been contributing to the cost of doing business. Today on this week's News in Depth presentation, we'll be looking at the global economic factors leading to the instability in the Zambian economy. We'll be talking to various stakeholders on this very important subject. Welcoming you to the program, my name is Penifa Nyirenda, and stay tuned to this presentation. Developments on the global economy in the year 2015 have caught many countries unaware. Global economic growth during the first half of 2015 has slowed down to the weakest level since 2009. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) recently downgraded its global growth forecast to 3.3% from 3.4%. This is the weakest growth rate since the financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. The slump in growth for both the developed and emerging countries has been compounded by the significant reduction in commodity prices. Prices of commodities such as oil have hit a low of $46 per barrel, while copper is fetching for less than $5,000 per ton. With all trading activities having been smooth sailing for the last 6 years, where has this volatility originated from?
A few months back, the United States Federal Bank announced a policy which they call quantitative easing. Now, with this quantitative easing, what they were doing was to ensure that the dollar was made more scarcity, that they raised the demand for the dollar on the world market. Now, if you understand, the dollar is just like a commodity that you trade in. And it is a world currency, actually. Everyone, regardless of their other currencies that they use, they still use the dollar on the international market. Now, what America was doing was to strengthen their dollar. China announced where they wanted their economy to be run by their citizens, meaning citizens will now have to spend more in China their money, where the Chinese people would have to buy more of the product that are produced locally, and China become more of what I can call a consumption economy. So they changed their economy setup, and doing that, what happens is that the import that China was getting was also minimized, and Zambia being affected in that way is the copper, which we export to China, which is the biggest export that Zambia depends on.
With the quantitative easing effected by the American economy and the Chinese currency devaluation outlined, do these developments equate to a financial crisis?
I think mainly what is going on, I think many people today are calling it economic meltdown, but that is not the actual stance. This is what we call currency war. China, for the first time, removed their currency from a fixed exchange currency rate, which was standing at 1.96 against the US dollar. And for the first time, they removed it from the fixed, or what you call pegging, and they put it on a free fall exchange, which was raised to 5.63%. That is a huge change in terms of exchange. What happened is that on the international market, people went in for the yen, and there was also the issue of the quantitative easing, where the dollar now was gaining power. Okay, so it made the yen weaker, even more weaker than they had predicted. They thought they can do this for a short period of time, but they cannot. They couldn't manage. They did not foresee how crafty the money market is.
The pressures on the global market have posed an even bigger challenge on developing nations.
Most currencies, even in the region, in Africa here, and also in Asia, in Europe, actually feeling the effect, because the United States dollar has actually gained, and most currencies are finding it difficult to trade with the dollar. Even in Zambia here, it's not only actually in Zambia. So sometimes you can discover that most nations have actually hit the record low in terms of trading with the United States dollar. It's happened in South Africa, it's happened in Zambia, I think in Ghana as well, in other African countries. So because of the shocks happening at the global scale, we can see that the effect has trickled down to Africa.
The developments on the world market may be perceived to be beyond Zambia, but global interconnectivity through trade has seen direct effects on the local economy. An indicator being closely watched is the country's inflation rate. At the end of August 2015, inflation increased to 7.3% compared to 7.1% recorded in July 2015. On the local money market, between August and September 2015, the volatility on the global sphere has placed pressure on the Zambian kwacha. The local currency has depreciated to an all-time low of 10 kwacha in its trade against $1 US. This is because the Zambian currency performance is heavily dependent on external factors. The central bank governor Denny Kalelia has an explanation for the kwacha depreciation.
China for us is critical because much of our export, which is copper, ends up in China. It may be bought by traders somewhere, but the final destination is China. So when things are not right in China, obviously we get affected. So this has played a lot more in our market. We have seen the copper prices come down to the last week. Actually, they had come below 5,000 mark. Now they are about 5,000 from a high of nearly 8,000 not long ago. So that change has been quite significant, and it, along with it, has brought pressure on. And you recall that also this came on the back of the impasse which was there with the mines and the government on the fiscal regime. So just when we thought we had overcome that, then this also kicked in, and then the energy pressures. So all these are playing out in putting pressure on our kwacha, because exports have come down very significantly from last year. I think on a year-to-date basis, this time we're talking of a decline of 2%.
The value of the kwacha, like others in the region and beyond, is expected to depreciate further if circumstances on the global market remain as they are or even worsen. The effect on the Zambian people and business in general is an increase in commodity prices, more so that most products traded in Zambia are imported.
When the kwacha devaluates, the immediate impact is on the citizens of the nation, meaning the money that you have will not have the same value it had before. Meaning if I get paid 5,000 kwacha, that 5,000 kwacha, because of the devaluation rate which is happening today, is not going to last me a month. So meaning I have to find other sources, meaning the income of the people reduces drastically. In this point, like our country, which is so dependent on imports, a tertiary economy, what is happening today is that you have imported goods increasing in pricing. Meaning, if you're buying bread today at 5, if you were buying bread yesterday at 3 kwacha, and you use 15 kwacha for 3 days, you find that the following morning your bread has gone to 7 kwacha, and you budgeted 3 kwacha, meaning your budget you have to shift and change the budget, and that means that you'll be spending more, and yet this is not what you are earning.
The unstable kwacha is throwing importers like Alan Simchimba into losses. Alan, a car dealer, has seen his profits reduced by almost 20% since the kwacha began its depreciating course.
Well, it has affected my business in such a way that at the moment I can't order cars from Japan. I'm just relying on the local market. So I'm only buying second-hand cars and reselling, because the dollar rate is something else. When I order a new car from Japan, There's a profit margin of about 10,000, between 8 and 10. But when I order second-hand cars from here, I make something like 3,000, 2,000, because the local cars don't come very, very fit. We start working on them to customers' specification.
In mitigating the effects of what has affected his main business of importing cars, Alan has been made to divert to simply making peanut butter as a backup survival measure.
Well, the little profits that we make from the local sales, the local orders, I think we put it into good use and invest it. So the time that we're not selling cars, we outsource
So you're diversifying your business, I would say?
Yes, yes.
Would you explain maybe the other line that would help you survive?
Well, I'm venturing into peanut production. That has been part of my other survival way.
Alan's story is no different from that of Sarah. She imports children's playing equipment from different parts of the world, and now she too is trading at a loss for her most recently imported goods.
We know that the dollar has escalated. It has subsequently added a touch of a certain decline with the percentage and the ratios, because the supply intake is different. Before, the dollar was at least affordable. Let's say, for example, you have the dollar which was about 6.5, and now it's about 9.9, 9.5. It's a huge marginal difference. Whereas before, we would have to bring in goods according to that rate. But now it's not consistent. We're not too sure with what's happening. You'll find you get an order, obviously, which you subsequently sign a contract for about maybe, I'll give an example, when the dollar was 7.2. When you sign the contract for 7.2, by the time you decide to bring in the goods, the dollar has already gone to 9, of which means that it affects your business technically and directly. So you do feel the effect, because it doesn't make it any difference. The person that subcontracted the order with you is not going to say you have to extend it to 9. He's obviously going to say it has to stand at 7 because the contract relies on the same afterthought.
She feels that the story would perhaps be different if some of the goods she needs for her business could be sourced locally.
We as Zambia, in particular, rely a lot on importation. We rely a lot on imported goods, rather than we are not an exporting country. So obviously we will feel the burn in an instance where you need the goods, you cannot access them here. The only place you'd have to get them from, like maybe let's say China, Dubai, Thailand, and the costs, with the rising costs, is quite hard this time. It would be easier if we ourselves decided to produce these items and then they're acquired within the country. We wouldn't be facing the current challenges that we're facing.
Alan shares in this proposition.
Business would stabilize if we can have a car assembly industry in here, just like South Africa has car assembly industries. It's quite cheap to buy a car when you're in South Africa and use it there. Yes.
Evidence of Zambia being a predominantly importing nation reflects in the country's trade balance sheet, which has been in deficit for the most of 2015. The Central Statistical Office, in its monthly updates, shows that the country yet again recorded a trade deficit valued at 958.3 million kwacha in July 2015. This simply indicates that the country imports more than it exports. The CSO further notes that the highest trade deficit in 2015, valued at 1,293.1 million kwacha, was recorded in June, and the lowest trade deficit was recorded in January, valued at 52.6 million kwacha. The inability to increase exports as a result of a sluggish manufacturing industry has therefore been seen as a major factor contributing to the severe effects on Zambia.
So for us to bring those imports into the country, we're actually paying much more. So That's also another issue that's actually affecting us. And the result, you can discover that our kwacha has become significantly weak because of such forces of supply and demand. So as a result, we're actually paying more and we're exporting less. But it's only if we actually export more, then we can also gain that strengthened dollar, bring it into our economy. So in simple terms, that's how I would explain it, because we have actually been exporting, we've been importing more. And as a result as well, our manufacturing base is not really up to standard for us to claim that, we export to standards where we can actually satisfy the economy.
Pundits are further concerned with the dependence on copper for the sustenance of the Zambian economy.
Is advantaged because it's at the center of Southern and Central Africa. And all these neighbors that we have, they have needs that perhaps Zambia can actually supply to them. Also in terms of the routes and how we are opening up Zambia with the link Zambia, and also the rail lines coming up, I think it can be a strategic place whereby trade is actually conducted in Zambia. And through that trade, we are sure that Zambia will bring in as much money as possible. Those are the only ways that would really help us as a nation, like relying on copper prices, which usually fluctuate, every now and then. And those keep on sending waves, negative waves to our economy, as well as affecting our currency, which is our kwacha.
What the IDC has got currently are some of those projects and programs where copper must have value addition products. For instance, one of the biggest companies that uses our copper is attached to Toyota, which is the biggest car exporter in the world, and they make alternators. As it is right now, within the Chinese economy, there's a $13 trillion that Chinese has lost within this period. And they have also suffered in terms of their business. So right now, what we can do as Zambians is to ensure that we lure companies like that, we bring them into Zambia, they establish they do establish their plants here in Zambia, and they begin to produce these alternators, and these will bring us the much forex that we need.
A further look at the country's trade data confirms that copper dominates exports to countries that include the troubled China, Congo DR, South Africa and Singapore, all of which are overtaken by the volumes sent to Switzerland. The delays in diversifying the economy have contributed to the predicament Zambia has found itself in.
There's a declining copper production, declining copper prices, and then an expensive dollar, an increasingly expensive dollar. So this is a concoction that provides a very unfavorable environment for a country like Zambia. Okay, but it sends very important signals in the sense that it highlights the need for us to diversify and focus more on exporting other things beyond copper.
What has made the Zambian case even more desperate is the high cost of energy. Most recently, the country has been subjected to an increase in load shedding due to low power generation capacity.
The other things that the industries, the manufacturing industry is facing is the issue to do with the costs. You have high energy costs in our country, which they cannot survive. Okay, whenever you produce at very high cost, your product is non-competitive. If you produce it at cheaper cost, your product becomes competitive internationally. So you have other countries who have set goals where the energy is very low and their production costs are very low, and they are coming into Zambia. Their companies are exporting into Zambia, and Zambian products are non-competitive.
With the argument of buying local coming into the picture, the question of capacity for the local manufacturing industry therefore comes to play. The central bank governor is advocating that Zambian people buy locally produced goods.
Our economic outlets here, one of the selling points is that buy this is imported. Huh? Now, if you removed that and said, okay, can I find an alternative to this? I think eventually it does happen. Things which you are saying, no, this is not for me, I think you may start looking at it differently. Is it something which can work? So in other words, you can reduce your expenditure on those things that are more expensive. The switching part of it comes if you are importing things. Why don't you look at domestic? I'm sure now in the environment, which is a number of people are beginning to look at what is produced locally. Now, you may say that, well, maybe it's not as high quality as the other, but that comes with the time.
Mr. Nsupila is, however, worried that skilled labor has significantly reduced due to the recent emphasis on business-related training.
So people started going for commercial courses. We saw Lusaka Trades become Lusaka Business College. We've seen Livingstone Trades become Livingstone Business College. We've seen a lot of colleges and training institutions that were churning out people at crafts level that are needed in manufacturing and other technical sectors, becoming oriented towards providing courses that are related to social things. Okay, so you're talking about accounting, marketing, business management, and all that. Which business are you going to manage if there's no production? What accounting are you going to do? What are you going to market if there's no production? So basically, what has happened over time is that we lost the skills that we have, and we've had very limited investment in developing skills in these areas. So the infrastructure and the institutions of learning that are churning out people with skills in these areas has been run down.
When it comes to the manufacturing of high-value goods, have the manufacturers risen to the occasion?
I think there are roles to be played by government in terms of creating a conducive policy environment that facilitates for the development of a competitive manufacturing industry. There's a role to be played by the individual players in the manufacturing sector. There's a role to be played by associations like ourselves in the association. And clearly, when you look at Zambia, Zambia's need to diversify has been recognized from way back. I mean, in 1984, the Zambian government passed the Export Development Act that actually established the Export Board of Zambia. The Export Board of Zambia was established in 1987 with the mandate of diversifying the Zambian economy. I think somewhere in 2007 we saw it transition, merged with other 5 organizations to become ZDA, and there's an export development component within ZDA. Okay. So the need to diversify has been recognized for a very long time. I think what we haven't done, and this I'll be very straight, is to direct our energies and all interventions in a systematic and mutually reinforcing manner towards attaining what we've been aspiring to do.
Beyond buying local products, Zambia is also being encouraged to trade with other African countries.
Copper prices have been affected. Oil prices have been affected. So for the copper prices, we know that they've actually, gone down. And the oil prices as well, crude oil, have actually gone down. So now, coming down to Africa, you realize that most of these countries that do export to China would not have all those inflows that come from China, because China will not buy as much from them. And also, this is now a call for integration. Let's talk about Africa. Do we have a ready market as Africans to trade within ourselves? Because that way, it would at least help us ease from the shocks that happen at an international scale or a global scale.
Dr. Kalialia highlights the potential of the agriculture sector as a remedial measure that can be considered in making this situation better.
Zambia, we have lots of arable land. But how much of it are we using effectively? Many of us will be proud to say, I have a piece of land. But you go, what happens at that piece of land? Mostly grass, And when we grow, are we efficient producers? It's not the case. So can't we do better? Take a country like Botswana. They have diamonds, but they also produce livestock. We have the space here to do livestock as well. More than that, we have the land to grow the feed In fact, Botswana buys some of the feed from us here. Molasses from Zambia sugar, Kafue sugar, bran from some of our farmers here, because in Botswana, rain is much more problematic than we are. So can't we turn this into some competitive advantage?
The Policy Monitoring and Research Center has its own proposition of remedies that can save the situation.
So we know that government has also come up with the measures of the sinking fund, for example, with the 2 euro bonds. And those areas, or that decision definitely is a decision that would help Zambia, because definitely as shocks continue on the global scale, we also have to think as a nation of how we're going to sustain our economy, at the same time be able to pay the debt that we have and also the service, the euro bonds. So definitely the issue of the sinking fund is one issue that should be clearly strict in terms of the allocations of money that are going to be put there aside for us to service the euro bond in light of the strengthened US dollar as well. So that is definitely a positive move on Zambian side, on government side, to ensure that we are able to pay back the issue of the euro bond.
For the manufacturers, political will is a must in making the difference.
We need to deliberately reorient our procurement policy, public procurement policy, to support local production. This is what everyone has done who has developed industry. India, we know about Tata. In India, you are working as a minister in India, there are plans for Mercedes-Benz, plans for all the big motor vehicle manufacturing industry. But if you are a minister in India then, you had to buy a Tata vehicle. It was a substandard vehicle compared to all these. But deliberately, government supported that because they wanted to take Tata to another level. Today, Tata is one of the most diversified companies in the world. In ICTs, in motor vehicle, in other things. They're doing all sorts of things. Power plant development, electricity. You know, it comes from some level of support.
One only hopes that the downward trend the Zambian economy has taken is just but a moment, which will soon be over. But what is true is that any economy goes a cycle of ups and downs, but the economic challenges of today need concerted efforts of every Zambian to overcome. Like President Edgar Lungu has recently hinted, hard work on the part of every Zambian will translate into a stronger economy, one which will be resistant to external shocks like fluctuating commodity prices. Well, here is where we end this week's presentation of News in Depth. We've been looking at global economic factors affecting developing countries like Zambia, more especially focusing on the recent depreciation of the Zambian kwacha. We'd like to thank you so much for your time. Do join us next week at the very same time as we explore another interesting subject. My name is Penny Fanyerenda. Goodbye and God bless you.